Hi, I'm Simon Drew, and you're listening to the Practical Stoic Podcast. If you'd like to find more episodes of the show, as well as articles and information about my one-on-one alignment coaching, then you can head to my website. It's simonjedrew.com. If you do have the means to support the show, then I'd love to see you in my Patreon community. Just go to patreon.com/simonjedrew, where you'll also get access to over 240 episodes recorded before 2020. But for now, enjoy the show. Hey everyone, thank you so much for spending your time here listening to the Practical Stoic Podcast. Now, today is kind of a change in direction momentarily here on the show because I've never spoken to a politician before, which I am doing today. I'm speaking to a political representative from here on the Sunshine Coast where I live. And the reason I'm doing that, I'll give you a bit of a backstory. So basically, a few weeks ago, I got a flyer in the mail, and it was pointing out something that I'd kind of seen in the news prior to this, but it kind of jumped out to me when it was in my mailbox. And it was a flyer from Fiona Simpson, my guest today. And it was basically talking about this secret development proposal for the Mooloolaba Spit, which is just this gorgeous area of it's kind of a natural reserve on the end of the Mooloolaba beach. And this is public land where people run through, spend time with their families, go on picnics, all sorts of things. So it's a great place to have here in Mooloolaba. And it would be a shame if it were developed into, a giant skyscraper or some new hotel, because it's such a nice place to spend time. And I think that it's important that we maintain our connection to what makes the place that we live so beautiful and so wonderful to live in. And one of those things is the natural resources that we have here in the natural land that we have to go spend time in. So I guess if there's anything that I want you guys to get out of this episode today, because I know that most of you are over in America or around the world, this might not directly pertain to you, but if you're interested, what I'm trying to get across here is that one of the best ways that you can actually make a difference is to actually go and speak to your local representatives who are directly responsible to you, who are trying to make changes in your local community, meaningful changes as well. And regardless of what political team, Fiona Simpson is on, what I'm trying to demonstrate here is she's going after an issue that I think is important to pay attention to, especially seeing as I'll be moving away from Mooloolaba, in the near future. It's important that I don't lose the connection to the land where I live right now and lose the connection to keeping it, I guess, beautiful for future generations to come. And Fiona is directly combating this issue and making sure that this area doesn't get developed into just another hotel complex, And so what I want you to get from this today is if you've got a specific issue that you care about, if you've got something that's happening in your local area that you know about but you've never done anything about it, well, that's actually one of the best places where you can start to make good, positive changes towards a better future for yourself and for everyone by talking to your local representatives and having a say in your local area. So we have a really interesting brief discussion today, and I hope that you enjoy it, and I hope that you get something out of it. And even if it doesn't pertain to you and you live over in America, I hope that you can take something away from it and maybe go and get involved in your local government as well by sharing with them how you think the community should grow and develop. Now, before I jump into the interview, I'm going to tell you a little bit about Fiona, and then we'll go straight into it. So, Fiona Simpson is an Australian politician serving as Liberal National Party's member of the Queensland Legislative Assembly, representing Maroochydore. Simpson served as the Speaker of the Legislative Assembly of Queensland from 2012 to 2015, and further served as the Deputy Leader of the Queensland National Party and Deputy Leader of the Opposition from 2006 to 2008. So, with that said, I really hope you enjoy this interview, and I thank Fiona so much for coming on the show. It was a pleasure to speak with her and to know that our local representatives are so keen to get out there and share the messages that they are pushing for. So, I present to you this interview with Fiona Simpson. Why did you get into politics? Because you grew up here on the Sunshine Coast. What was it that made you jump into it?
Well, it wasn't my life plan from the get-go. That's something that did evolve over time. And I had a family background in that my dad had been the member for Karura, which was based on Noosa and up to the hinterland, and in the days when there were only 2 state seats. Obviously, the Sunshine Coast has grown a lot since then. I had an understanding, but not a desire from my younger years ago. That's what I'm going to do. I wanted to be a journalist. In fact, that's where I went. That's what I was I trained for, I loved, I worked as. And so it was a big change in direction. And I think this is a year when a lot of people have been through a lot of disruption. Now, some disruptions we can choose, some can happen. In this case, it was a disruption I chose. And I actually quit my job as a journalist, went and, of all things, did a music album and wrote music for 12 months. And towards the end of that 12 months, because I intended to go back to journalism, I got really, if you like, turned on to the concerns of a number of things happening in my community where I was challenged. I went from being someone as a reporter who would report, analyse and put things into public space to realising I needed to actually not be an observer who chronicled and presented. I needed to stand up on some of these issues. So it was a big crossing over into the public arena. So there's a longer story, but long story short, I felt, well, if you want to make a difference, you can't sit back and whinge about it. That doesn't mean everyone runs for Parliament, but what it does mean is that we all have, whether it's a voice or something in our hands to do that benefits and changes our community, small or large. And I was challenged that I could no longer just chronicle. I needed to stand up and have a crack. So it's a longer story, but very much cynics never change the world for the better. You've got to be out there and putting into action what you believe, and if that's in a small or a large way.
Yeah, that actually speaks to a question that I was going to ask later in the interview, but I want to talk about it now because, you know, I have felt lately that, look, there's a lot of young people who are very disenfranchised, very angry about the way that the world is kind of heading, and with many very, very, very good reasons, you know. But like you say, cynicism doesn't really get us that far. I mean, it's very important that we jump in and actually take action. Do you see a lot of young people getting involved in politics today? Like, are there a lot of young people who are actually getting in there and trying to make a difference?
I think there are a lot of young people increasingly engaged, and one of the challenges, I suppose, from I'll talk as a conservative politician, is that we need to make sure that we engage with people across those age groups. And one of the challenges, all revolutions often start with the young, but they're not necessarily driven by the young. And in a very disrupted time that we're going through with the COVID impacts across the globe and locally, you don't always know who's actually driving the bus. So there's opportunities and challenges that come not only with disruption that impacts people's health and their economy, but politically. So what do I mean by this? I think it's a good thing for young people to be engaged and concerned about many of the issues that are being talked about at the moment. But I am concerned that unless we have the ability to have conversations where people dive deeper, where we don't shout down different voices, where we don't, a phrase that's used a bit at the moment, deplatform, but essentially meaning that people shout so loud that you don't hear the voices, because we get a better society where we don't just have shouting, loud, polarised voices and people being shut down. You get a better society where you can actually have some true tolerance of hearing those different voices, sometimes not always agreeing. And that, I think, is what my concern is with probably the tone and the targeted passions that can sometimes have unintended consequences. And so if we can sort of challenge, not just channel, but encourage people to go deeper, have deeper conversations, listen. I think it is very important. And this sounds all very nice and airy, fairy and fluffy, but at the end of the day, when there is, I think, the potential for good or bad, depending where things land as far as people being hurt or helped, you need deeper conversations because complex issues don't have simple solutions, and you don't get a better society by shouting people down or removing people from the marketplace of ideas.
That's a brilliant way to put it, removing people from the marketplace of ideas. Because I mean, if you have something that you're passionate about, it seems like you would really want to listen to the other side, because if you do listen to them, then they might tell you what they're really up to. And what they're really up to might be way worse than what you think. Like, you need to be able to go so much deeper, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And we can talk about the wisdom of years. Not everyone gains wisdom with years. I think it's a choice to be willing to listen to those different voices. And there can be wisdom of younger years too that can sometimes see things and say, look, I don't think that's right. However, I think particularly in the world of social media, you don't always know who's driving the bus. So when people jump on it with an anger that might be rightly placed, but directed in a way that might have a wrong outcome. And ethically, whether you intend to do harm or not, you're actually just as responsible as someone who intends to do harm. And I remember, I can't actually quote you where I first heard that concept. That challenged me, because even in state parliament, yes, I'm an opposition member, but you're grappling with ideas and legislation, and sometimes things are presented in a way that's intended for a certain consequence, but the outcome is quite different. And we are just as responsible for the wrong outcome as for the one that you had actually may have intended, if that makes sense. In other words, there's a greater responsibility to own your actions and dig deeper, and don't just say, oh, I didn't know.
And our culture is full of these kind of ideas that should inform us that this is exactly what could happen if you're not paying attention. Like, the road to hell is paved with good intentions, or no good deed goes unpunished. These kinds of sayings. It's like, well, have a think about. I like the way you put it. Make sure you understand that you don't always see who's running the bus. And one of the greatest examples of that is we jump on social media and it's just so full of negative comments. Everything's bad, and then you walk outside and you go to your local cafe and everybody's nice, everybody's cool, everyone's having a good time, and it just doesn't give us a clear picture of what's actually happening. But speaking of what's actually happening, I want to dive into this debacle with the Mooloolaba bit. So explain to me what's happening here.
Look, thanks so much for having an interest and seeing the flyer, some old technology, a flyer in the letterbox. I had some documents leaked to me. Maybe this is my own journalistic background. When you get something and you say there's something here, it was a document where the state government in Queensland were looking at redeveloping the end of public space at the end of Mooloolaba, beautiful area, as you know. And when I've asked questions about the state government, firstly, they attack you. You sort of get that. It's, try and kill the message by killing the messenger. No, nothing to see here, but I actually had it in black and white of what they were looking to do. And the fact that they put out a consultancy brief at $65,000 may not sound like a lot of money, but I think actually it's evidence there was skin in the game from government to say we really are serious about this, looking at increasing the height levels, taking out some of the old buildings that do need to be taken out, that are derelict, but then giving over more space to commercial development in that area, giving over public space that should be for the public. And that's when your alarm bells ring. Things that are done in secret, they attack the messenger rather than explain what they're doing. And when I've continued to press, I've got more documents, and basically it stinks. Now, will they throw it out and do something different? Well, let's hope so. But when you have things that are done in secret, they attack the messenger, they won't reveal what they're doing, there's good reason why you need to say, well, we've got to put a focus on this, get the public involved, and put some pressure on the government to firstly release what they're doing, and then make sure we protect this area with the right outcomes.
And that was one of the craziest things that I kind of read, which was that, they're spending $65,000 to obviously do a whole survey of the area, find out, how they could develop it further. The fact that it's not kind of out in the open. It's not like, hey, here we're trying to see what we can do to develop here. It's all very in secret.
Yes.
But what do you think are the chances of this actually happening? Do you think that it's pretty firm that there are people actually working towards this, making this happen? Do you think that it's a long-term project? How long do you think it'll take before it actually comes out in the open?
Well, I think we may know just before an election, but until all documents are public, you really don't know. And at the end of the day, how confident am I that we can overturn this? I am confident that the community is against high-rise or over council height limits, because whatever high-rise is technically, even to take things over a certain height in that area that may not be a skyscraper would be inappropriate. I'm confident that with the community support, we could certainly press back against this. As to what the government's intentions are at this point, well, it's shrouded in secrecy. So in that respect, my view is that you go hard and get the community on board so the views of the community are well known, so that if there is any further moves, we're in a position to quickly harness those voices that people have actually signed up to petitions. We're keeping in contact with people, letting them know that we are the guardians or the custodians of this area. We have to stand as custodians so that, if someone's kicking tires behind the scenes to see what they can get away with, we've got an army is not the right word, but a force of local people who will stand up and stand with us on this issue.
And I think custodian is the right word there. I've already mentioned to you that, I will soon be, I imagine, moving to the United States with my wife. And something that has occurred to me is that, with increased globalization, which is, a good thing in many ways, one of the things that it does is when people are constantly moving around, they sort of lose an attachment to the land. I run through the area. It's such a beautiful place where people spend time with their families. You don't want to lose your connection to what is really beautiful about the area that you live. But at the same time, you can't be naive to not see that, corporate interests, people with a lot of money who would like to have that land for their own interests, probably have more of a sway in the local government than the average people who live here and run through there every day. So how do people in the local community who don't necessarily have access to that level of government, how do they influence the decisions? How can they get on board and actually make a difference?
Look, great question. And firstly, it's one way. I launched a petition that was about certainly informing people as well as giving them a voice in that process. But there will be more to come because you can raise an issue, but you need to keep it raised in the public domain. Firstly, what people can do, they can certainly write to the local representatives, write to the state government, and put an individual voice that's not just a mass-produced postcard of in a campaign, if you like. So, yes, you can do that. There are a range of things we can build on top of that, but people should never underestimate the power of their individual voice. And whether people live locally around this area or who are attached to this as visitors of our wider community, I would say that is one thing you can do. And then, yes, you can have meetings of people, but we haven't been able to under COVID. So I think that the voice of people and whatever mechanism on social media, you can certainly pick up some of the feeds off my website where I've got information where people can go in and say, oh, it's not just her talking about this. I can actually see the source information that Fiona's based this upon, because it is in black and white, the source information. So I would say become informed, use your voice. Petitions are one thing, but you can also write to government. If you write to me, I can also keep you informed about it. So as I work with community with the other steps in trying to keep this in the public sphere and pressure on government, people can be part of that process.
Yeah, I love it. And that's what I'm all about, just practical advice for what can I do right now to make some sort of difference? Because too often people feel, including myself, we feel as though we can't really do anything. It's like we're not in government, and things are going to happen whether we like it or not. But one of the questions which I was wondering is how do you see us balancing? What do you think is the most effective approach to balancing, say, economic growth in a community whilst also maintaining the beauty of that community and the natural beauty of that community as well, which all too often is the first thing to go when people want to make a little bit more money?
Look, terrific question. And this is not a science, it's an art, but it's also about, once again, people being informed. I support good economic development where people have jobs and the opportunity of a dynamic business community. That doesn't mean we have no soul or commitment to the beauty of our local area. And we are custodians. That's a word we both talked about before. And a custodian, whether it's from ancient Indigenous custodians to those of us who are more recent upon the landscape, I think we all have a responsibility to leave our world a better place, be it physically or socially and culturally, in how people nurture their families, how they interact in the community and care for each other. So there's a physical environment, but there's also the environment we create and how we care for our community. Both are important. So jobs are important, but it's not at any price. So I think public space becomes even more valuable because as your community grows in physical numbers, these areas become quite pressured. So we should be very vigilant about what's proposed, particularly on public land. There can be private land that also has significant impacts, but public land is there for generations. And so to answer you, vigilance, information, it's not that you can't do things at all. We've got services for the fishing industry at the end of Mooloolaba Spit with police, and I actually was responsible for getting the water police down there at the end of the spit. So there are things that you should do in those spaces, but watching out for those who'd push the envelope all the time and pack it out with things that aren't appropriate. So information, involvement, and an eye to generationally, is this a good investment, not just for today, but for tomorrow?
Yeah, that's it. Looking generationally, I like the way that you put that. And I just wanted to ask a couple more questions just about the state of politics, your experience in it. What's been over your successful career in politics? What have been the lessons that you've learned that you didn't realize? Let me rephrase this. What surprised you about the political process when you jumped into it? And what do you think has been most effective about the political process in Australia? Sorry.
Yeah, well, when I first ran, I was only 26 and 27 when I was elected. So I was relatively young. Well, so they tell me I was relatively young. I didn't think I was at the time. And very much that belief that you've got to be willing to not just talk, but do whatever that may look like, not necessarily run for parliament, but for me, that's what I did. What have I learnt? I've learnt along the way that, there's a lot we can reflect on. So let me try and prioritise this. I think always keep your eyes on the why and why you do things. I have beautiful young people come up to me and say, "Oh, I want to go into Parliament. I want to go into," and I will always say, "Well, tell me more about yourself, but tell me also why. I want to know what their heart is." For me, the why matters, and I think we can all get busy, whatever course, vocation in life we may choose, and you don't want to lose a sense of the things that are truly important. And for me, in politics, in this responsible position, you can get so busy, and the why matters. So keep that at the forefront. Meaning, for me, the why, and I don't want this to ever sound corny, but my why was because I really believe that governments can do good or harm, and that I want to see my community prosper and flourish, but also not have people, I'll call it little people is not a good phrase, but people without power disenfranchised because people have got the ear of government. Anyway, the why is it's about people. So what else would I say? You're going to get disappointed. You're going to even, a harsh word, be betrayed by people you may even have trusted. So that's why I talked about be careful about who's driving the bus. So eyes wide open, meaning that along the way, human nature, you're going to see good, bad and terrible. You're going to see outstanding people. You're going to have your disappointments. And I've seen too many people get bitter in life because they invested their life and time in what they thought was their why, and then didn't realise that their identity had become wrapped up in the roles. So where I'm going with this is that part of the journey of what we invest our passion, our life in, is not seeing your identity just in the roles that you hold, being true to having time to refresh, nourish the soul, and not be so busy that you can't keep a perspective on life, that there's nothing new under the sun. And for those leaders who've led through challenging times, for those leaders who've led through peace times, nothing's new under the sun. But one thing we do need to ensure is that you never become so busy that you lose your perspective, context, and your sense that you aren't who your role is. And look, there's many other things I could reflect on, but some battles you win today, some you win tomorrow. And at the end of the day, we're responsible for how we manage our time, but we're also responsible that you can't control other people's behaviour, but you can control your own responses, and not to lose yourself so much in the busyness that you don't realise still the why along the way. That might sound very airy-fairy or abstract, but I think during the COVID times, there's been a lot of people who've hit a bit of a reset button too around context and priorities. And I don't think I've hit a reset button, but it's something that's probably more focused, that you realise that in the busyness of life, use the time that you've had fruitfully, but don't stop to also see the landscape of people around you and your own part in that journey. And don't be so busy that you can't chill, think, pray, not think, have the margins in life so that that deeper thinking I was talking about is possible.
Yeah, I think that's good advice for anyone. And I think I just had one more question for you, Fiona. Around election time, you see everybody coming out with their posters and everything, and everybody seems to have like one thing that they're kind of pushing that they hope will get people to pay attention to their campaign. I think last time I saw somebody was saying that they were going to put soap in all of the public bathrooms. I thought, yeah, okay, cool. That's your issue. That's it. Now, is that more of a campaign kind of approach, or is it actually the case that in politics you kind of have to pick your battles and say, this is the thing that I really want to happen and I'm going to work until this happens? Like, can you work across the board with many things at once, or is it very much does the winner focus on something specifically?
You will have a suite of things you're working on, but obviously there will be priorities. I think that we're working increasingly in a very disrupted, I've used that word before, disrupted communication space. So getting people's attention and connecting with them, you don't have a lot of time, and you've got a lot of competition. The day that we're speaking, we've just the last print run of the paper I used to work for all those years ago. There are multiple platforms, multiple people speaking. So the nature of communication in many ways is getting simplified where there are very complex issues. So unfortunately, it becomes more important for those of us who do seek office or who hold office to learn how to communicate more simply, which is really hard for me because you probably notice I like a lot of words. But so to answer you, you may only hear a few things that are listed as priorities, but there's always going to be detail that sits behind that, and there should be. and communication and the space that's quite fractured, where a lot of people don't even watch TV these days. They'll be on Netflix or whatever gives them entertainment. So that is a space of challenge. So that's why I'm really pleased you saw my flyer in your letterbox. It's the old technology. You try everything. You've got to be across multiple platforms. But sometimes if you're talking about a multitude of issues, it might miss what's going to cut through. So that's a real challenge. So long story short, there will be priorities. There'll be more things, though, than what you will see. And that is why when there are issues, or members of parliament or whoever, councillors, it actually pays people's voice. You asked me, what can people do? That issue of Mooloolaba spits one, but I would say don't just look at the glossy brochures. Ring them up. Ask to see them. Heck, you've got every right to go deeper on a range of issues that aren't in the literature. And you should, because there will always be more detail, and there will also be positions that don't make the 10 dot points of priority on that documentation.
Yeah, I really think that we rely on the government, but I think that it would be correct to say that the government also relies on us to be eternally vigilant and to go deeper into the issues so that we are actually informed and we make good decisions on who is going to be in government. So, Fiona, I'm really grateful that you came on today. I'm really grateful that you're working towards keeping the spit beautiful and natural and a good place for people and families to go. So whatever I can do to help you on that path, please let me know. I'm always happy to help. And thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you very much. It's been great talking.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Practical Stoic Podcast. If you'd like to sign up for email updates, join my Patreon meetup groups that we hold weekly, or if you'd like to offer feedback or suggestions for future guests or topics on the show, then you can head to simonjedrew.com. There you'll also find information about how we can work one-on-one together with my alignment coaching, based around the philosophical principles found in Stoicism. Finally, if you are on Facebook, then I'd love to see you in our group, the Practical Stoic Mastermind. But hey, I hope you've enjoyed this episode, and I'll talk to you next time.